Hello viewers, welcome to this channel. Today we are looking at some JUPEB government past questions. Please come along with me. Number 1. Politics according to Aaron Laswell is defined as activities of political parties and pressure groups, authoritative allocation of values, who gets what, when and how, activities associated with the governance of a state. Looking at these options, A to D, they are all interpretation of politics from one point of view or the other. But a particular reference to Aaron Laswell has to do with who gets what, when, and how, which is C. In other words, how do we allocate available resources? And who is getting what position at what point or the other? That's what Laswell said. The correct option here is C. The next question. The subdiscipline of politics, which focuses on the similarities and differences between political systems, is called what? Comparative study, comparative relations, comparative politics, comparative systems. Looking at the similarities between one particular politics and the other, or trying to compare between two or more politics, we call it comparative politics. It is a subject of discussion in the university environment. So correct option is C. Let's see the next question. The only political institution that can use legitimate force to command obedience of people in a state is called police, government, army, customs. If you look at these options, all of them are encapsulated by one word. Police is part of government, part of the executive arm of government. Army is part of the executive arm of government. Customs is also controlled as an agency under the arm of government, the executive. So the most correct answer here is option B, governments. Which of the following is not a form of political activity? In other words, all the options here are correct. Only one is not part. So let's see which one that is not part. Particularly, we are talking about political activities. Okay? Voter registration, voting an election, contesting an election, getting a job in an electoral institution. A, B, C are correct because they are all political activities towards election. Getting a job in an electoral institution is your work. That is not part of political activity. So the most correct answer is option D. Let's see the next question. Which of the following is not a feature of a nation? What is a nation? In one of our previous sessions, we discussed nation, state, society, and what have you. What is a nation? An entity that has common feature, common ancestry, common history, common culture, common language, homogeneous in nature. That's what a nation is. This question is saying which is not. In other words, among all these four options, 3 of them are correct. Only one that is not. So let's look at it now. Common ancestry, ancestral history, like what I said earlier, common language, homogeneity, heterogeneity. Heterogeneous is a society with many cultures, diverse languages, diverse ancestry, diverse history. So it can't be a nation. So a nation is homogeneous in nature. A nation has common language. Like an Igbo is a nation, Yoruba is a nation, Hausa is a nation, Fulani is a nation. So the correct answer for this question here is D, heterogeneous. Okay? Next, the branch of politics that deals with the study of relations among states is called what? We just answered this question in number 2. The number 2 question we answer right now is being repeated here again. You can see duplication of questions in another perspective. So, like I said in the number 2 question, the answer is comparative politics. When you compare 2 different political systems, we call it comparative politics. When you look at the interrelationship between different states, We call it comparative politics. Next, in-depth interview as a data collection procedure is an example of exploratory method, quantitative method, qualitative method, inductive method. When you are talking about in-depth interview, trying to get to know, it is qualitative method. If you are talking about calculations, data, numbers, then we'll talk about quantitative. So the correct answer for this question is C, qualitative method. I hope you're enjoying this session. Please subscribe to the channel to enjoy more. Sovereignty is an absolute, in an absolute monarchical system, is vested in the, remember, we have two major types of monarch. We have absolute monarch and constitutional monarch. An absolute monarch is a monarch that has unlimited power. It's not limited by the constitution. It's more or less above the law. It can do and do. All right? So the sovereignty of such a state, of such a community, where will it be lied? Is it in the constitution? Already we said the king, the leader could be above the law. Is it in the people? Is it in the king? Is it in the parliament? The most correct answer here is the king. But if it were to be constitutional monarch, the opposite of this, the answer would have been A, a constitution, right? And if it were to be a democracy, the answer would have been B, the people. But in this case, absolute monarch system, the sovereignty is vested in the hand of the head, the leader. Could either be a king, could be a queen, or be an emperor. So the correct answer to this question is option C. The next question says, government is a necessity in human society because it maintains. The question is trying to ask you and I, why do we need government in a society? Why don't just operate without government? A, to maintain different human associations. B, to maintain peace and conflict. That is funny, you know. I can't imagine you combining both peace and conflict at the same time. C, to maintain numerous ethnic groups. And D, to maintain law and order. The most correct answer there is option D. Government is necessitated in a human society in order to maintain what? Law and order. Next. Definite territory as a feature of a state implies that it is located. Now, when we say territory, that is boundary, location, is one of the elements of a state. And this question is a definite. The word definite means a particular space. It means it is limited. Huh? It means there's a boundary. It's not just unlimited. Okay? So let's see. It is located everywhere without boundary. B, it is in a particular geographical area with unlimited boundary. C, it is located in a particular geographical area with limited boundary. D, it is located anywhere there is access to land. The most correct answer to this question is C. A definite territory as a feature of a state implies that the state is in a particular geographical area. That area is limited with what? Boundary. That's why there's boundary between one state or the other. C is the correct option. We move to the next one. The type of influence where A is able to anticipate the behavior of B is called. In other words, an influence whereby somebody can anticipate or can predict the behavior of another person. What do we call it? All right? Indirect influence, exclusive influence, manifest influence, implicit influence. The correct answer here is manifest influence. Manifest influence is a direct influence. It means in one way or the other, you must have encountered the person before and be able to what? To predict how the person behaves, right? Manifest influence. That's the most correct answer. It's a direct influence, which is opposite of A. The correct option there is C. The most suitable form of government for a multi-ethnic society. Multi-ethnic society is a diverse society. Multi-ethnic society is a society that's heterogeneous in nature. We just mentioned a question like that. I think number 10 or 9 we just treated today, right? Heterogeneous, a society with multi-ethnic background, history, ancestors, and cultures and tradition. So what system of government do you think is good for this kind of environment or this society? Parliamentary system, federal system, unitary system, confederal system. The most suitable one that comes to mind is federal system. In fact, federal system was adopted by Nigeria because of the multi-ethnic nature of this country. So the most correct answer is federal system. The next one. Value-free political science means that the discipline should value-free. Okay? No definite statement, no definite stand. It means the discipline should be interdisciplinary. Concern itself with quantifiable knowledge. Emphasize reliable and objective knowledge. Deal with the ideal. What is the ideal? Who determines the ideal? Okay? Here we are talking about a value-free society. In other words, being objective, being open, being liberal. All right? That is the kind of society we are talking about here. In a political society where there is value-free, we talk about being open, being liberal. Okay? And that is being objective. So the most correct answer here, the discipline is emphasizing reliable, tangible, and objective knowledge, which is option C. Okay? Let's see the next one. Feudalism is an ideology in which, if you can recollect, feudalism is one of the stage of Karl Marx mode of production. And the word feudal means land. So we have the feudal lords and we have the manor or the vassals, who are the what? The land borrowers. Okay? So feudalism is an ideology in which what? A, there is a non-stratified social structure. B, political leadership is based on land ownership. C, the fundamental rights of the citizens are denied. D, there is equal wealth distribution. The correct answer to this is B, a political leadership that is based on ownership of land. Ownership of land. Okay? I hope you're enjoying this session. Please subscribe to this channel to get more from us. A system in which the major factors of production, distribution, and exchange are in the hands of private individuals. In one of our previous sessions, I think for WAEC or for NECO, we treated this particular question at that point. When we say private individuals are in charge of the economy, that is what we call capitalists. But when we have the opposite, that is public, the word public means the government, we call it socialists. But when both the government and private individuals that we know as bourgeoisies are collaborating to manage the economy of that society, we call it mixed economic system. So let's come to this question. This question says private. From explanation, the answer is clear to us. Option B, capitalism. Capitalism. Okay? And these private owners or private individuals are also called the bourgeoisies, who are the capital owners. Let's see the next question then. The third tier of administrative unit in the Nigerian Federation is the, to collect, we have 3 levels of government. We have the federal, also known as national government or central government. We have the states, in some cases referred to as regions before we created state. Then we have the local government, the municipal government, the grassroots government. So the third tier of administrative unit is the local government. Option D. Option D, the local government. Okay? The next question. Which of the following is a significance of the Berlin Conference that took place between 1884 and 1885? Berlin is the capital city of Germany. And this conference was called by the Chancellor of Germany at that point. Okay? Inviting all European colonial masters. All right? And coming together the purpose was for them to balkanize, to divide, to share the African continent among themselves peacefully to avoid a form of crisis or disagreement. All right? So I think it started December 1884, and that snowballed to January 1885 before it was done. They balkanized Africa, Africa that was referred to as the Dark Continent at that time. All right? So let's see. It made the Europeans to develop the politics and economy of Africa. B, it enabled Europeans to settle communal conflict in various African territories. C, it enhanced amicable sharing of African territories among the Europeans. D, it made the Europeans to be the legitimate owners of African territories. The correct answer here is C, it enhanced the amicable sharing of African territories among the European masters. C is the correct answer for this question. The next question. The 1970 abolition of non-white political representation in apartheid South Africa implies that blacks, that time when this policy was implemented, is segregated between the white and the black. So the black was seen as second citizens. They were seen as strangers, even in their own land. They were not entitled to enjoy rights like the whites. You know what happened in South Africa before eventually they put it on end and the emergence of Nelson Mandela as the president of that country. So what does this imply? That abolition of 1970, what does it imply? That the blacks are to vacate all the lands in South Africa? No, really. They were still there, but they were not recognized. They were not given entitlement or right like the whites. B, that the blacks no longer have citizenship status like the whites, of course. C, that blacks are free to rule themselves, not really sending them away. That blacks are as free as the whites in their separate land. This was after the apartheid. All right? So the correct answer to this abolition of 1970 was B, that the blacks no longer have citizenship status like the whites. Let's see the next question. I hope you're enjoying this session. Please subscribe to this channel for more. The next question. African societies where Europeans were forcibly settled at the expense of the inhabitants is called what? Surrogate colony, exploitation colony, plantation colony, settler colony. Like Lagos, when the colonial masters came, the Europeans, the British, they settled in Lagos in 1861. And by 1862, they took over Lagos from the king of Lagos then, Oba Dosumu, and they declared Lagos as a colony of the British Queen. So that's what they call settler colony. The correct option here is option D, settler colony. Let's see the next question. Which of the following is not a function of the colonial governor? In other words, the colonial governor performed all these functions except one. Let's see which one is not part of his function. A, appointment of public officers. Yes, he nominates them and appoint them into offices. Lawmaking, that's fundamental, his primary assignment. Prerogative of mercy, he could release somebody who's already condemned. Then appointment of secretary of colonies. The colonial secretary are superior to the colonial governor. The colonial secretary are appointed by the royal queen, the prime minister, and the queen of England. The colonial secretaries are expected to supervise all the colonies. In fact, the colonial governor reports directly to the Secretary of State. And Secretary of State is like what? A minister, a cabinet minister in England. So it couldn't be appointed by the colonial governor because it's superior to colonial governor. So the correct answer here is the appointment of the Secretary of Colonies. Let's see the next question. One negative effect of colonialism in Africa was that it introduced Christianity. We consider as negative as a positive to us because through Christianity we started education. Okay? It was authoritarian and dictatorial. Okay? It replaced slavery with colonial practices. It hated the educated elites. It could be an element, but the most correct answer, negative in this place, is that the system was authoritarian and dictatorial in the sense that they imposed themselves on us. All right? In fact, some of the local chiefs are being deposed who disagree with colonial policies or decisions. So it was authoritarian and dictatorship. The best option for this question is option B. Okay, let's see the next question. Administrative accountability in the civil service is enforced through A. Ministerial responsibility, B. Judicial responsibility, C. Mass media, D. Interest group. The minister is a member of the cabinet in government, and the minister performs supervisory role on the civil service. In fact, the highest cadet or the most senior officer in the civil service is referred in Nigeria to as the permanent secretary, or you call him Director General, DG. Okay? So this DG or PAMSEC report directly not to the president, but to the what? The minister. And the minister takes the report to the president. So the minister is performing a kind of supervisory role on the civil service, thereby making them to be accountable to the government. So the correct answer here is option A. So let's see the next question. One feature of public corporations that was weakened by privatization is, what are public corporations? Public corporations are government businesses, government establishments. All right? Now, what policy weakened this government establishment by privatization? A. Government control. B. Social control. C. National integration. D. Social harmony. Remember, as a public corporation, the major elements, the major characteristic of public corporation is government ownership, government control, government finance. Okay? But when it is now privatized, in other words, such organization or companies now sold to private individuals. So the ownership has changed hands. Instead of government controlling it, it now be private control. And the private could be, we now appoint what director generals and what have shareholders, okay, to manage those businesses for them. So what waned or what weakened in that process was government control, because government will no longer have total control of that particular business. In some instances of some of the organization, government may have shares in those companies, but the shares will be so minimal to the point that the government will not be able to control such organization. So the option correct for this question is A. Let's see the next question. The 1962 political crisis in the Western region was aggravated by the ideological differences between, I think this 31 is not supposed to be here in the question. That could be just a graphical error. Let's see. Obafemi Awolowo and D.S. Majekodunmi, D.S. Majekodunmi and S.L. Akintola, Kofo Abayomi and Samuel Akesanya, S.L. Akintola, and of course Obafemi Awolowo. If you have a little story about what happened in the Western region, we have a major political party in Western region known as what? AG, yes, Action Group. This Action Group was created by Obafemi Awolowo in 1953. This party was created from Egbe Omo Oduduwa, which was a cultural group of the Yoruba people. All right? Obafemi Awolowo was the leader of this group, and he appointed a lieutenant, an assistant called Samuel Ladoke Akintola, S.L. Akintola. Okay? So when Awolowo was appointed as the representative of the Western region to go to the center in Lagos, Akintola was the head at the region at the Western House in Ibadan. All right? Now, Awolowo, being the leader of the party and the leader of the people, Yorubas, the nation of Yorubas, also have a huge influence. And by so doing was, pushing this influence both from the center and to the region. And this was not comfortable for Akintola, who wanted to have his own sphere of influence within the West, leaving the center for Awolowo. So this led to a kind of disagreement between both of them. In fact, that led to the breakaway of Akintola Akintola left AG and formed his own party called NNDP2. Okay? Why 2? Because we already had original NNDP before, which was the first political party formed in Nigeria in 1914 by Abat Macaulay. So he had his own NNDP, and he now aligned with NPC, Northern People's Congress, the Hausa Fulani oligarchy. Okay? And that is what made them to charge Awolowo for treasonable felony offense, which sentenced him to prison in the 1960s. Okay? So the correct answer to this is SN Akintola and Obafemi Awolowo, option D. The next question, one of these political parties did not contest the 1979 general elections in Nigeria. The general election of 1979, which was clearly contested between or among 5 political parties. There were 5 political parties for that 1979 election. We have the likes of UPN, represented by Shehu Shagari. We have MPN, represented by Shehu Shagari. UPN, represented by Awolowo. GNPP, Great Nigerian People's Party, represented by Nnamdi Azikiwe. And PRP, I think it was Aminu Kano. Okay? Now, this NAP, which is a Nigerian Advanced Party, was created in 1983 by Tunji Braithwaite. Okay, it's late now, Tunji Braithwaite. And this party only joined them for the second election in 1983. This party was not existing as of 1979. Okay, so we had 5 that contested in 1979, but for 1983 we have 6 because of the addition of NAP that was created by Tunji Braithwaite. Okay, so the correct answer for this question is option D, NAP, Nigerian Advanced Party. Okay, the 3 political parties registered by the Independent National Electoral Commission to contest the 1999 elections were, remember, we were under military rule for a very long time, and eventually they decided to disengage by transiting power, political power, to civilian government. Unfortunately, that election, remember what happened then? We had Olufalaye, we had Olusegun Obasanjo. All right, these 2 guys were the major runners for that party. And remember, we still have Alex Ekweme too, who challenged Obasanjo within the word PDP. Alex Ekweme, okay, another smaller party like Onwanya and the rest of them. Okay, so what were those 3 political parties? Of course, I just mentioned PDP. So any of them where you have PDP, where you have AMPP, must be correct. Why? And AC or AD. Now, Olufalaye represented 2 tickets to challenge Obasanjo. That was AMPP and, of course, AD. Right? So, AMPP did not present presidential candidate for that election. They aligned together with AD as a way of challenging Obasanjo PDP, because PDP was the biggest political party at that time in West Africa. Okay? So, whenever you have PDP, AMPP, and AD, is the most correct answer. Or what is happening today, like AC, whatever, they are not existing that time. Okay? AC just emerged in a 2009 election, thereabout. Okay? When CPC and AC, CPC of Buhari and the AC of Tulubu came together to form APC. So don't put APC here at all. So let's see which option has this. Anyone have APC, of course, is wrong, because APC came up later. Came up later. So we have APP, PDP, AD. Okay. Then we have PDP, AMPP, AD, PDP, CAN, AD. The most correct option here is option C, PDP, AMPP, and AD. All right. Let's see the next question. The major cause of the 1993 general election crisis in Nigeria was the, I cannot forget this because I was part and parcel of those people that went on the streets to protest the annulment of June 12th election by the then military head of state, Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. He's still alive today. And he wrote a book last year, and in that book, he was trying to defend himself. That was not the one that annulled the election, but the cabals, the political powers that existed at that time made him to do that. Okay? So, from my explanation, you can see. Why was there a crisis for that 1920 general election? We cannot forget. Do you know why? This June 12 election was said by the international observers to be the freest and the fairest election in history of Nigeria. In fact, to date, no election has beaten that particular election. Unfortunately for us, where all of us, North, East, West, and South, came together to vote unanimously for one man called M.K.O. Abiola, who was said to have won the election, but because of his personal issues with the power that be, the military power then, the election result was cancelled, was annulled without any genuine reason given to the Nigerians. So the most correct answer to this option, without ado, is annulment of June 12 elections. Let's see the next question. The option A4 model was used in the conduct of this is just a follow-up to the previous question we just answered now. Okay, this option A4 was introduced by IBB, Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida military government. Okay, for that particular June 12 election of 1993. I voted in that election, so I know everything that took place that time. Okay, now in that election, this option A4 is testing the popularity of a candidate right from the grassroots to the national level. Okay, and it is a combination of both open and secret ballots who are made to queue up in the sun, in the rain, and then when it's time, you see when to go and do thumb printing. So it's a combination of both what? Open and secret ballot, option A4. So it was 1993 June 12 election as introduced by Babangida. Option B is the correct answer. All right? I hope you're enjoying this session. Please subscribe to this channel for more. Let's see the next question. A major characteristics of fascism is that, what is fascism? Fascism was a policy that was introduced in the early 1920s by, in Italy, the man called Benito Mussolini. All right? And it says that the leader is above the law. It says the leader has no limited power. Okay? It says the leader is even bigger than the state itself. All right? That's fascism by Benito Mussolini. So from that, what do we say? Is it a democratic system? No. Is it autocratic? Of course, 100%. Is it popular? No. Is it what decentralized? No. Because all powers are concentrated in the hand of what? The leader. So that is autocratic elements. The best option for this answer, for this question, is B, autocratic. Let's see the next one. Political parties are formed to, in other words, why do we form political parties? Let's go together. To educate the electorates, of course. To organize international conferences, is that not funny? Political parties. To advise on the appointment of judges, how come? How? To hire personnel for political leader, how? All right? To educate the electorates. The political party educates the electorate on how to go about voting system and voting patterns on the day of what? Elections. All right? Okay, let's see. The next question. One paramount objective of pressure groups is to... Pressure groups are said to be interest groups. One of our earlier sessions, we discussed these pressure groups. And we said the major concern of a pressure group is to influence government policies as it affects or relates to their what? Their own members. So a pressure group is actually not fighting for the society or for everybody. They're actually fighting for their members. Okay, let's see. So what is the objective of pressure group? A, to influence the public, to influence government decisions, to organize strikes and demonstrations. They do that when they have a disagreement with government. To criticize the actions of they also do that. But the question is saying paramount. Please take note of this word, paramount. The paramount means the most important, the basic, the main objective. The main objective of pressure group is option B, to influence government decisions. Okay? Which of these factors will not promote public opinion? In other words, all the factors will allow opinion of the people to count, except one. Press freedom. Of course, you allow people to speak, press to release information in the society. Opinion polls, taking opinion of the people. Opinion polls, all over. Okay? Selection of sampling. Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is similar to that A. A and D are similar, and likewise B. But this C, in other words, selecting only sample. In other words, it could also be a form of propaganda, picking only what you want to hear, picking only those that are speaking for you, not people that are speaking against you. So the one that may not promote public opinion is option C, selection of sampling only, without giving regards to the popular opinion of the people. All right? Electoral college has been criticized because you may want to ask me, what is electoral college? Is it like a college, secondary school we have? No. Electoral college is a group of people that is selected by the electorates, the voters, to go ahead on their behalf to vote for the final representatives. So in electoral college, we are talking about an indirect elections. We are talking about two stages of elections. The people who are the voters will choose a group of people, particularly maybe councillors of local government or chairman of local government, and they will not make these people their college, electoral college, to vote on their behalf for the final representative of the members of the parliament, the legislature. Okay? So why has people criticized this method? Why are people criticizing this particular process or method? A, it is very expensive. Of course, it could, because it involves two stages of elections. B, it creates more seats in the legislature. How? Because they are actually not going to the legislature, they are only voting on behalf of the people. Okay? It sometimes negates the wishes of the electorate. Of course, 100%. D, it makes legislature too responsive. How? So the most correct answer here is C, because the wish of the people may not eventually be spoken or be carried out by the electoral college. They have their own interests. They may not actually represent the interests of the people. So the wishes of the people may be negated at the final outcome of the election. So the most correct answer here is option C. The principle of separation of powers in a presidential system can be enhanced through. You remember separation of power as a principle of government. Separation of power was introduced by Baron de Montesquieu, that French philosopher. He was the one that emphasized and discussed more about this, where the three organs of government, legislature, executive, and judiciary, are clearly separated in terms of personnel and functions. Okay? Very well. Now, this SOP, separation of power, is more pronounced or well established under a presidential system of government, unlike in a parliamentary. In a parliamentary system of government, there is no clear-cut separation of power. In fact, instead of having a separation of power, in parliamentary system of government, we have the alternate called fusion of power because of the romance between the legislature and the executive. Why? Members of legislature as well performing the functions of what the executive. For instance, the prime minister. The prime minister is the head, the chief of the executive, but is also a member of the parliament. And when they appoint ministers, they appoint members of the parliament as these ministers in the executive. Okay? So, but in the present system of government, to make separation of power to be effective, we had what they call checks and balances. Checks and balances. You could see that the examiner was playing with words from the options. Look at option A. It says check. What has check got to do with this? Check and balances. B, checks and balances. C, checks and balances. And D, choice and balances. The most correct answer to this question is checks and balances. Okay? Viewers, I hope you have enjoyed this section. Please, to get more on this, subscribe to this channel And if you have any other question to ask concerning this or more, you can send it on this channel, and we are going to attend to it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm sure you enjoyed the video you just watched. To see more of this kind of content across all examinations, including WAEC, JAMB, JUPEB, GACAO, NEET, SAT, IELT, literally up to 100 exams, make sure you hit the subscribe button and check the channels for all of these videos and tutorials.